to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you, Bob Kincaid. Welcome to another edition of the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. It is Wednesday. It is the 4th day of November in the year 2015. It is a pleasure to be with you on this, our third day of programming this week. I very honestly, I feel pretty good because there's been so many weeks that we haven't got our full complement of 3 programs in. So when I do get to Wednesday, I usually get excited because it looks like, barring some unforeseen difficulty, we're going to make it through our 3 scheduled programs, and that always makes me feel very, very good. And of course, the reality is we're 4 months, or a little bit more than 4 months away from 3 years of broadcasting. Early in March, on the 11th of March next year, we'll have completed 3 full years of broadcasting here in the Virtual Center. I mention that because I know that Bob Kincaid and his Head On Radio Network has been in business now for better than 10 years. I mean, that is just hard to believe. It's unbelievable because I can remember when it first began. And I know Bob didn't dream about it lasting 10 years, and I didn't. And even with the Virtual Center, I thought, gee, if we could get 6 months to a year of programs in and get some really high-quality programs archived and available to other people who might want to learn a few things about the nation's early history, it'd be wonderful. And the thought that we're still around after close to 2 years and 8 months is just amazing to me. We would love to hear from you, and I appreciate you being here at the Virtual Center, and especially those of you who are regular attendees here at the Virtual Center. But we would love to hear from you. I know our listeners would love to hear from you as well, your thoughts and your ideas on some of the issues that we've been talking about, the issues of the day. And, of course, it seems like more and more, much of what we talk about in the 18th century seems to have dramatic significance in our current situations. I want to get into share a few thoughts about that in a moment. But we would like to hear from you, because if you are tuned to this program, if you are a regular listener of programming on the Head On Radio Network, that kind of signifies that you take matters seriously, you think, you reflect, and you have something meaningful to say. And I just want you to know that we would all love to hear it if you choose to do so. Our phone number is area code 304-640-6495. That's 304-640-6495. If you'd like to direct your thoughts or your ideas directly to me via email, I would love to hear from you. I do understand that there are some people that just don't want to get on the air, and I can understand that. Then by all means, please don't let your good ideas die for lack of an audience, so to speak, because I would love to hear them, and I would love to share them with our listeners if you're not willing or comfortable doing that. My email address is WAObrien, OBRIEN, 906 @gmail.com. That's WAObrien, OBRIEN, 906 @gmail.com.
Hey, Dr. Bill?
Yes, Bob?
Before you get going, John, out on the road, has a question for you, please.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you, Bob.
Go ahead,
Hi, John. How are you, John?
Yeah. Oh, I'm short, fat, cute, the usual stuff.
Oh, that's great. Some things change and some things don't, right, John?
Well, that's just because you get better.
Get better and better every day, yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah, I hope you'll be safe.
Unfortunately, I don't have I get your show off kind of like the iTunes, or not iTunes, but TuneIn, stuff like that, and I didn't know exactly what your subject was. So I wanted to kind of catch you kind of early before you got too into something.
That's
I don't know
great.
if my question.
Right ahead.
It kind of maybe refers back to your shows the last couple of days.
Okay.
Something kind of dug in on me a little bit here, and I'm going to pull this kind of out of my head. I looked it up. Now, in the Constitution, it says, if I can translate it quasi correctly, is that Congress has the power to create and regulate. I'm using modernistic terms. Money. Am I saying it right, or?
I didn't quite catch it, Bob. John, you broke up a little bit. Can you repeat it? The Constitution says that Congress has the right to do what? Hey, John?
To create money.
Oh, to create money. Okay, I couldn't hear it. John?
And his call just dropped.
Oh, okay. I knew it was breaking up on me, and I didn't get the gist of it. To create money, I presume he means print money. And of course, the big thing was that the states were not allowed to do that. But I'm assuming John might be listening or will be listening. One additional thing to that is that the Supreme Court moved in very quickly in some of the decisions of John Marshall and his thinking on corporations. Corporations undertook a substitute for money very early in their history, if you will, by making their own bills available and substitute for loans and cash and those kinds of things. So they were able to supplement the money supply a little bit, but it was not anything that the government was directly involved in. So it didn't violate the Constitution. But the main thing was to deny the states the power to print money, which they, of course, had under the Articles of Confederation, and that created real problems for the nation's creditors. Maybe we'll hear from John when he comes back, but I know that we'll hear from him another day. And of course, if he is on the road, it's understandable that you lose signals everywhere, and I can understand that. I wanted to before we got into anything today.
Hey, Dr. Bill.
Yes, Bob.
I think we've got John back.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, Bob.
Here we go. Let's try again.
Hey, John.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's
I'm sitting
okay.
in a place which has full signal, and then some big truck will drive by, and you think, oh, hell, American corporate welfare here.
Yeah, I understand.
Anyway, let me try to bump this through. The Constitution says that the Congress has the power to create and regulate, and again, I'm using modern terms, the creation of money,
right,
and the value thereof.
Right.
Now, you were talking about Hamilton and his activities, and this kind of ties a little bit into also the civic responsibility side in the modern world, because we seem to be having a problem in our world because all of our monetary creation these days is all done by debt.
Right.
You know, you go buy a house or whatever, and the bank just writes a piece of paper, and bang, all of a sudden there's all this money running around.
Right.
Now, the thrust of my question is, and it may not even be an appropriate question, but we'll try it anyway. Does this in any way is this what they intended, or because I know that they made some revisions about it during the Ulysses Grant era, but about how money was always supposed to be backed by gold or silver or something.
Yes.
And then they keep tinkering with it. And now we've gotten to the modern world where there's a thing that's now running around, which is not particularly popular, but it's a thing called modern monetary theory, where you have where basically money is nothing but something on a spreadsheet. I owe you, you owe me, back and forth.
Right.
Can you, if it dovetails with something about what you're talking about, can you kind of expand on that a little bit? Because it seems like There's something inherently wrong with that.
John, I'll do the best I can, because I understand it is very confusing, and you're right, and I'm not totally sure I understand it. But one of the things you said struck a chord with me, so maybe we can begin here. In an essay that Alexander Hamilton wrote at the time that he was defending his funding bill, he wrote a piece called Vindication of Funding. And in that piece, he laid out the following scenario, which is very, very much like what you said. And Hamilton said the following: if a government borrows $100, it spends it, and that is capital, while the bond may be sold, and it is another $100. Thus, the credit of government produces a new capital of $100, unquote.
Yeah.
In his biography of Hamilton, William Graham Sumner, he wrote William Graham Sumner, if you remember the name, was late in the 19th century. He wrote a biography of Hamilton, and he said, in reference to that, these notions show a remarkable amount of confusion in regard to money, capital, and debt in the mind of a man who has a great reputation as a financier. And William Graham Sumner was saying that there's something wrong with that. But what you're proposing, what you're saying, and I think you're in part right, is that while it's difficult to understand, in part it's true that there seems to be a lot of this bogus capital. But again, I understand when you talk about the IOUs. If I enter into an agreement with you, with an IOU, no money has to, theoretically, basically the IOU becomes money.
Yeah,
as long as other people are willing to accept it and accept it as legitimate and have faith in it. And that's what Madison was talking about in Federalist Number 10 when he talked about faith. In the 18th century, when they talked about faith, they were talking mainly about people's willingness to accept credit and to accept that a promise to pay a certain amount is valid, is money. In other words, it's something that you can rely on. And the whole idea of the movement of capital and the operation of capitalism itself, I believe, is built on that kind of trust or that kind of faith that as money, if you offer people a piece of paper that says $100, then you've got to have faith that the person you give it to will accept that as being worth $100. If they won't, then the value of the money, the bottom drops out of the value of your money, and you can't do business. So, that's the part of it I'm really, I don't understand, because I'm not in business. I'm not in that kind of finance. I listen to Donald Trump a lot in his many appearances on television of late. And I enjoy listening to him because he talks about money as if all of us can really understand and relate to the kind of operations that he apparently or seemingly participates in all the time. And I don't really, I'll be honest with you, I can't relate to it. But he does. And the way he talks about it.
Now, I have a thumbnail understanding of it, but and this refers back to what you were talking about the unscrupulous speculation that was going on. You had people back, the Revolutionary War veterans and stuff, had been paid in like a script,
right,
and like certificates and stuff, as it was. That was the war debt.
That was the war debt.
Right. Now, what was happening is anybody who actually had quote unquote money, be it gold coins or whatever,
right,
was going out and buying and using modern terminology, they were buying on, they would buy a $100 certificate that was owed to a Revolutionary War veteran, but because during the transitions between the Continental Congress and into the new Constitution and everything, no one knew if those things, I mean, those things were virtually worthless.
Virtually worthless, exactly.
Yeah, and people were going around who had money and were buying these things up, and like I think you were talking about how some in the know, being Hamilton and stuff like that,
right,
who knew that these things were going to be accepted back at face value. There was a lot of condemnation because the people in know were going around and buying up all these scripts, advertisements in the papers and stuff, buying them up for 10, 15 cents on the dollar,
exactly,
and then cashing them in at full value.
And the only way that could work is if the vast majority of people did not know that this stuff was going to be worth what it was printed to be worth. And
because
and what that says to me, John, and I don't know whether this helps or not, but I appreciate the question because it's a great one. That you can manipulate the value of money by the way you treat it. And what I mean is, if you have the ability to get your position out there, if you're Donald Trump, for example, you get on television anytime you want. You have the opportunity to affect the value of money by the way you talk about it. In other words, you can basically make a suggestion out there to the general public that the value of something is not really worth the paper it's printed on. And if you say that, and if enough people hear it and enough people begin to believe it, then it becomes not worth the paper it's printed on, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah,
you can do that, and you can do that the other way. And what I mean is, you can go out there and you can artificially create an environment which makes something look like gold, and people jump to it and buy it. And once they get their hands on it, they begin to realize that it's not worth nearly what you thought it was worth, that what they've done is they've inflated the value. And that's what happened. That's a lot of what happened on this insider trading scandals that were going on in 07, 08 during the recession crash when Obama came into office, is that a lot of these banks were dealing in derivatives and were dealing with mortgages that they were basically packaging and telling prospective investors that they were worth what they said they were worth, but in reality they knew that the owner of the property, the customer, was going to have to default on the debt because they couldn't pay it. So they knew that they were selling a piece of paper that claimed to be worth a certain amount that wasn't.
Yeah, and that kind of comes into the last part of my piece here. The country is supposedly, depending on what you're talking about. You're talking out right now, just talk about the federal debt. They say we're $18 trillion in debt. But is it not logical to take this thought to this next step is that the fact that the country is $18 trillion in debt, because, like you said earlier, the government goes into debt and spends that money,
right?
Is it not equivalent to say that government has now injected $18 trillion in value into the economy, which is now in other people's bank accounts and stuff?
As long as people don't lose faith in the fact that at some point in time it will all come out even.
Yeah.
In other words, people have to believe that the economy is good for it, that the economy can make up that debt. And that's why I believe that's why many Democrats who have been in Congress for a number of years and I guess you could say are in part responsible for the size of the debt because they are the ones that voted on it. But they believe when you look at the size and the potential of our economy is more than capable of making up that debt. One of the things that, for example, that I think Bernie Sanders is making this point that the interest rates on loans are so low that what that means is money's cheap because the interest rates are low, which means that it would be the perfect time to borrow the money needed to invest in the infrastructure of this country. Because the interest rates are so low, and what that means is money's cheap. And so therefore this is a good time to borrow money. And what Bernie Sanders is talking about here is taking advantage of the fact that interest rates are low and that money is cheap, and using this as an opportunity to invest in the nation's future. And his idea is that what it's going to do is create jobs, meaningful, well-paying jobs, which are going to infuse more money into the economy. They're going to create more people who can afford to buy homes, to buy cars, to purchase health care, and all the rest of it. And that what that's going to do is infuse activity into the economy, which will more than make up for the debt that's been incurred.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's talking about. And in my little pea brain, although I'm not an economist, says to me that seems to make sense to me.
Well, yeah, it does make sense, but then again, you got the Republicans, as I sometimes refer to them, as of course they're going to lose their freaking minds and sacrifice virgins on the altar to try to stop it.
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at that, you recognize that these same people are the ones who are defending people that have millions of dollars in unpaid taxes sitting in offshore accounts and things.
Sure.
And Donald Trump's talking about finding a way to bring that money back. Now, of course, a lot of what he's talking about is forgiving a significant portion of the debt that's been incurred. But be that as all of this is theory, and what that means is all theory by definition operates on a set of assumptions which everybody must make in order for the theory to make sense. Well, the problem, it seems to me, is we can't have any faith in the assumptions because what we have is a political situation between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans have every reason in the world to violate the sanctity of these assumptions.
Yeah, their
I don't know. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
To me, it's absolutely unbelievable. But one of the things that you said, and John, this I got to thank you for because I think you made a very good point. You had said at one point early on, is this what they intended? And I'm not sure how sophisticated the understanding of high-powered economics at that time was. Because for Hamilton to put out in writing a statement about that and then have it challenged by an economist who would suggest that Hamilton, who's gone down as one of the nation's greatest financiers, could make a statement like that, suggests that there's an awful lot from the very beginning of this that is based on faith and assumption. And
I didn't know. Not to if I can be so bold as to make a suggestion.
Go right ahead.
And it might be instructive to take maybe a couple of episodes in the near future and go through the controversies of the first and second national banks and Jackson's opposition to it and things like that.
Okay.
That might dovetail kind of well into the whole idea.
It probably would, and it would sure as hell educate me because that's stuff that I used to dodge like the plague. Because I didn't really understand it. It would be a great opportunity to dig into that stuff and see if I could figure some of it out. I'd like to do that.
Yeah, because I think it kind of, it's like when Hamilton, put his proposals out, they did not. I mean, it wasn't like they reached into a big bag of coins and started pulling them out because they didn't have it.
No, it wasn't.
They'd exchange one certificate for another.
Yeah, it was all based on faith. And of course, in Hamilton's idea, I mean, if you think about it, and I'll be honest with you, I hadn't thought about it until you called. So I appreciate the hell out of this, because right out of the chute, right from the very beginning, Hamilton is operating at cross purposes here, because he's basically suggesting to the speculators that, and suggesting to the nation at large and to Congress in his proposals, that the debt that he's incurring or wants the nation to incur will be paid. But the fact of the matter is, for political reasons, he's not interested. He doesn't care to pay it at all.
Yeah.
His whole point is that as long as the debt goes unpaid, you retain the loyalty and the support of the people who are owed the money.
Yeah. I mean, this ties into the Risk Whiskey Rebellion and that occurred in the Washington administration, where they were trying to get taxes out of the whiskey that was being used as currency.
That's right.
People in the rural areas.
And what they're doing is they're looking, when you talk about excise taxes, you're looking for the average person in the country to pay in taxes the money necessary to fund this speculation that's going on. And so there's a transfer of money here from the poor to the wealthy. And
they were using the poor people basically to carry and pay the interest on the debt.
On the debt
that was owned by the speculator class and the wealthy people in New York.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And today, conservative Republicans are looking at, for example, Bernie Sanders, and they're saying one of the things, he's a socialist, one of the things he wants to do is redistribute money from the people that have it to the people that don't. But what they refuse to acknowledge is much of what they have, they took from the people in the first place.
Okay.
I mean, so money's being distributed all the time. It just depends on which the hell way, which way it's going, as to whether you like it or not. If it's leaving you, you don't want it, you don't like it. But if it's coming to you, you love it. And so basically, Hamilton set up a program where the people in this country would be expected to pay the money to make this whole program go. And the fact that Tugwell and these people during Roosevelt's New Deal are citing this and praising it suggests to me that in the 200 years from Hamilton up until the mid-1930s, people are still continuing to operate on the very same assumptions that this is legitimate, that we are a community, and that means we're all in this together. We all have a part to play, and what that means is people need to be taxed in order to generate the revenue so that the people who create profit can create it.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is they're keeping it. They're not sharing it. They're not investing it. They're hoarding it. And they're investing it in things like art and overseas accounts, so they don't have to pay taxes and all of this other stuff. In other words, they're taking the profits that the people are creating out of the economy, for Christ's sake. Excuse me. I'm getting a little bit carried away here, John. But
oh no, you're right, because you look at the stock market right now. A lot of the stock market is being built up on these companies taking the profits they've made from their business and they're buying back their own stock, driving the price of the stock higher,
right?
So that the CEOs who are paid in stock options can then sell these overpriced stocks and pocket the money.
And pocket the money.
It's a vicious cycle.
And they are,
Okay.
in other words, they are directly able to affect the value of the very stock in their own companies by buying their own stock, for God's sake. I mean, it's absolutely, it's legal, I guess.
Yeah,
but it's unethical as hell.
Well, it gives you the point in time when, you have more respect for the bank robber because at least the son of a bitch wore a mask.
I love you, John. Hey, buddy. Thank you. Thank you very, very much, my friend.
All right, let me let you go. And
thank you. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thanks for the call. It was great. It was a great one. Thank you. Bob, that was a great one, my friend. He's cool. He's neat.
Yeah, that was a dandy. And I was going to mention something, but he got away too quickly.
Go ahead.
Talk about inflated stock prices. Give me 1 sec here.
Okay.
I feel like I've been gargling with sandpaper. My voice is kind of trashed. I was reading, there's been an outbreak of E. coli out in Oregon and Washington.
Northwest, yeah.
Yeah. And 35 people have been sickened after eating at Chipotle restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, somewhere in the body of the story there was mention of what the stock price was.
Right.
Care to guess? Now, this is just a little chain of sort of faux Mexican fast food.
Fast food, yeah.
I mean, I've eaten there. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
There's a sort of knockoff of Chipotle called Qdoba, and we've got one of those in Beckley.
Yeah.
But guess
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
over there where you and me and
I know where it is. I didn't know it was connected to this operation.
Well, it's not connected. It's a knockoff. I mean, it's a Chipotle wannabe.
Right, I got you. Okay.
But it's quite good. But Chipotle's been committed to organic and locally sourced, and doing a lot of things the way that we'd like to see them done.
Right.
But apparently they. And of course, whenever you've got E. coli on vegetables, it means that the vegetables have had fecal material around them at some point in time.
Right. Something has happened to the vegetables. Yeah.
But anyway, no, the stock price. Just guess.
Well, I don't have any idea. I
think it was like $261 a share.
Oh my God.
Now, how can that possibly be? A share of Chipotle is more expensive than a share of Apple?
Yeah. Oh my God, Bob.
I mean,
Does that suggest that something's going on here with the value of the stock?
Well, it does to me. I mean, this is a Reuters report.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No. Company shares closed down 1% on Tuesday at $623.16.
Oh my God!
One share of Chipotle, $623.16.
Wow!
And the previous day they hit their lowest level since July. Now they got 1,900 restaurants. $623.16.
Yeah, that's really high.
I was astonished when I read that.
Now, does that mean that the see? This is where I don't know what I'm talking about. Does that mean that when the stock gets valued that high, that it can split, and more shares can be sold? And
theoretically, yeah. I mean, at $623 a share, it could split three ways.
Yeah. Oh my God, Bob, that is amazing.
So when y'all mentioned extreme share prices, that immediately popped to mind. And
yeah,
I'm not a Wall Street guy. I'm not an economics guy.
I'm not either.
But that was a stunning number.
But if it was John's call that did this. Again, Bob, it's a classic example, it seems to me, of why interaction and communication generates knowledge. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
I hadn't even, and never had occurred to me until I was in conversation with John that what this program talks about, what Hamilton is talking about, when he's talking about the excise tax funding the rest of the program, he's basically talking about redistributing wealth.
Well, yeah.
I mean, but redistributing it upwards. And that's legitimate. But when they talk today about Bernie Sanders threatening to redistribute wealth and take from the people who work and give it to the people who won't, that's redistribution of wealth. That's theft. That should be illegal. And,
right.
And the fact of the
downward
matter is the whole damn economy functions on redistributing and moving wealth back and forth.
Right. Well, and wealth redistribution that goes down and out to the people, in the conservative mind, that's bad.
Yeah.
Wealth redistribution that makes sure that everybody can go to the doctor when they're sick, that's bad. On the other hand, wealth redistribution that takes from all of us and props up an ailing Wall Street bank, that's good. That's good. That's not called wealth redistribution. That's called subsidy or saving the economy.
Yeah, investment in the future. Yeah. It's amazing, Bob. When you
the thing is, these clowns who holler about socialism. Well, the fact of the matter is. And I'm sorry, clowns is probably a bit strong, but,
right.
The fact of the matter is we got socialism going on all over the place.
Yeah.
Wall Street gets all kinds of socialism. GM got bailed out socialistically. Yeah. GM is still alive because of socialism.
That's right.
But with Bernie Sanders, what we're saying is we would like to have some socialism too.
Yeah.
Not we want to have socialism because it's never been here. We would like some too.
We would like this to really be a community.
Yeah,
where the
we'd like to be able to send
it went both ways.
We'd like to be able to send our kids to Podunk State without having them come out with $100,000 in debt.
That's right. That's right. So in reality, this is a very this makes for one additional reason in my mind for really getting into Hamilton's program, because
I think so.
He's laying it out, and the Tugwell quote, where they say that this is what happens: you take from the working people and you make it available to a moneyed class so they can play investment games with it. And that's what they're doing with our retirement funds. That's what they did with our pensions. All of it.
Yeah, I mean,
it's redistribution of wealth.
Pension reform from defined benefits plans into 401ks was nothing, if not a redistribution of the retirement system into the hands of and onto the tender mercies of the Wall Street traders.
Of Wall Street, exactly. And that's what it was. And all it did was infuse all this money. It drove the Dow Jones numbers way up, doubled and even tripled the day. I mean, I look at it now, the Dow Jones is right on the edge of, it's back to 18 almost. It was 17.9 something this morning. So it's basically recovered from this little blip over that it experienced in October. But those of us who got notices, our monthly notices on our retirement accounts that said you lost $3,400 this month. We're not going to get that. I'm not going to get that back. I'm getting it at 3%.
Right.
Oh man, I'll tell you, this is amazing. This is good stuff.
Oh, it is very much, and I'll let you get back to it.
Hey, thank you, Bob.
My pleasure,
Bill.
Bill.
I appreciate John's call so much. I wanted to make a couple of comments at the beginning of the program, and I'll still make them, even though we're a little bit removed from the beginning. But I wouldn't exchange my comments for John's call for $1 million. But especially since my $1 million is going to go into the pockets of somebody with $1 billion. But anyway, I couldn't help but pay attention to the election results last evening as they were coming in, showing that once again the Republicans experienced a victory. And well, the biggest victory, of course, is in Kentucky. Excuse me. But they also experienced somewhat of a victory in Virginia. And Virginia was the Virginia Senate, and I hadn't realized this until last evening. The Virginia Senate was within one seat of Democratic control. It was in Republican control, but one change, in other words, capturing one seat on the Democrats, would have given them control of the Senate in the state of Virginia, primarily because in a tie vote, the lieutenant governor breaks the tie, and the lieutenant governor of Virginia is a Democrat, along with Terry McAuliffe, the governor. So the Democrats in Virginia made a big push in a number of areas, districts that they saw the Senate elections yesterday as being, up for grabs and possibly having a chance. And the governor over the last 4 weeks has been traveling all over the state, injecting himself directly into Senate elections, trying to affect the outcome. Well, yet last night, of course, was the election, and the outcome was that the Democratic effort did not succeed, and that the Republican Party in Virginia retained its very small majority in the Senate. So what that means is that with the election in Kentucky, the election of the conservative right-wing Tea Partier in Kentucky, what that means is that the 8-seat majority of Democrats in the Kentucky legislature, the lower house, is the last bastion which prevents the Republican Party from controlling every single southern state legislature and state house. In other words, the only place left, barring the next election, obviously, which will be the 2016 election, obviously the Republicans are going to make a play to win control of the House of Representatives, the House in Kentucky. That'll give them total control of all the southern state legislatures and state houses. Think about that. More importantly, it seems to me, think about Mark Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments. Think about Article 5 of the Constitution and the calling of a constitutional convention. Think about the reality that over the last several elections, the Republicans have meticulously taken control of state legislature after state legislature. They are in a position to have at their beck and call the 2/3 state support necessary to call a constitutional convention. And I would suggest that the time is right for them to do this. If next year, 2016, was not a presidential year, and if we weren't already a year out in the midst of this campaign for the Republican nomination and the campaign for in the Democratic Party, with obviously involving a lot fewer candidates, but if we weren't in the midst of this presidential campaign, and if the Republicans didn't really believe that they had a meaningful chance to win the White House next year, my guess would be that they would go for the Constitutional Convention right now, in other words, early in 2016. My guess is, however, that they'll probably wait now, this is just my guess, to see what happens in the fall of 2016, because the Constitutional Convention, if there was one, would obviously, I'm guessing, and again, this is just a guess, I'm guessing that if a convention was actually going to convene sometime in 2016, it would begin to garner a lot of media attention. And likely that's not going to happen with the elections in November looming. So there are two possibilities here. One is that the calling of a convention could happen and that the attention and the publicity surrounding the presidential elections in the fall would continue to dominate the media to the point that the second convention would continue to fly under the radar and not get the attention that it warrants. The other possibility would be that it will. That this would be an issue or an item that would be so significant that the media couldn't avoid dealing with it and covering it. My guess is that the latter is probably the more meaningful, the more reasonable. So what that leads me to believe is that the call for the second convention will probably not happen until after next November's election. Thinking seriously that the Republicans might have a chance at the White House next year. So what that means is that we're probably looking realistically at a call for a constitutional convention early in 2017, if not before. And heretofore, up to this point, nobody is looking at this. Until last night, for the first time, looking at election coverage coming in, I was looking at MSNBC. I was mainly looking at Rachel Maddow's program from 9 to 10. But then at 10 o'clock, and I can't remember her name. Her last name is Wagner. She used to have a daytime program on MSNBC. She's now replacing the host, whose name I can't remember, that's on the 10 o'clock show on MSNBC. And one of her panels began to address not directly the issue of a second convention, but they began to address, this is the first time I've seen a discussion in the media focused on the fact that the Republicans are meticulously getting control of state after state after state. And the argument last night was that the Democrats have acted or are acting like they're not even aware of it. They don't even see it. They're so focused on the national election for the office of president that they're really letting the Republicans get away with, unchallenged, this step-by-step, state-by-state takeover that they've been able to pull off through the last several elections. This is the first mention that I've seen in the media that anybody is even aware of the number of states that the Republicans now control. Last night there was no mention of the second convention. But now that people are beginning to look at the number of states that the Republicans control, state houses, in other words, governorships and legislatures, it seems impossible for me to believe that somebody's not going to basically look at Article 5 of the Constitution and look at the implications of this. Levin's book came out in, 3 or 4 years ago. So they've been able to pull this off under the radar. And a lot of the reason for that is the unbelievable amount of public attention that's focused on the horse race for the presidency, for the nomination of the two parties. In other words, the debates and the election campaign, it's hard to realize that the election itself is a year from now. We've already had, two Republican debates, one Democratic debate. There's another session to Friday night, I believe. The Democrats are meeting. Rachel Maddow's got all three Democratic candidates on with her on MSNBC on Friday evening. So we've already had a number of debates. The attention has been focused on Carson and Trump and the horse race between them. and what's wrong, or what's wrong with the campaign of Jeb Bush and all the rest of it, and the flamethrowers in the field, Ted Cruz and Chris Christie and the others, and that's been garnering the bulk of the attention. And what it's doing is throwing into chaos, into turmoil, the more predictable aspects of the party system and the election system and all the rest of it. What that means is that the traditional way to anticipate political outcomes no longer work. One of the people that was interviewed last night by Rachel Maddow was Tom Brokaw. And Tom Brokaw was making a couple of points that I thought were extremely insightful, extremely perceptive. And what he was basically saying is that this election is different than previous ones. It's so different that many of the rules and many of the guidelines that benchmarks we used to use in order to make predictions about what was going to happen no longer apply. For example, the amount of money being raised by the candidates. One of the things that has made Jeb Bush a viable candidate throughout this process so far is the amount of money he's raised. The amount of money that is available to Hillary Clinton has been a major factor in the Republican primary so far. It's been one of the major hurdles that Bernie Sanders has had to confront. The fact that he's just now putting out his first campaign video, campaign ad, as it were, because they are so expensive. But Brokaw pointed this out. Hillary Clinton, when she appeared for 11 hours before the Senate committee, the Benghazi committee, effectively got 11 hours of public visible attention without paying a nickel for it. Not only that, but Donald Trump and Ben Carson are getting more availability, more attention in the media without paying a nickel for it than candidates have ever been able to get before in presidential campaigns. And a lot of it is driven by what is called the social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. What that means is that Donald Trump can get on the evening news every single night. He was, late this summer, he was called to jury duty, and it was covered by the media, and it got national attention. Social media makes it possible for Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and the others to get, every time they make a speech, every time they say something, it gets on the national media. Donald Trump, throughout the process, has been bragging about the fact that he was using his own money and he wasn't taking PAC money. But the fact of the matter is he hasn't had to use any of his money yet. We're giving him all of that time, all that visibility, and he doesn't have to pay a nickel for it. It seems to me that this changes the whole nature of the game, because what that suggests is a way to get around the need to raise a lot of money. I don't mean you can do it on a shoestring. But what I do mean is, depending on your personality, if you can pull off, if you can make news every day like Donald Trump is able to do, then you never have to write a check. It seems to me that that has significant ramifications in our political campaign. That's a totally new factor, a totally new variable. So what this means is then that here we are, we've come this far in the presidential campaign so far, and with the exception of Jeb Bush, who's been forced to spend a lot of money because his campaign is in the tank, so to speak. That's Donald Trump's term. He's been spending money that doesn't seem to have a payoff. But for the most part, the others haven't had to. And what that means is it's allowing them to stay in the race when finances should have said that many of them, not most of them, but many of them should be gone by now. In the last presidential election in 2012, Adelson's money, the Chicago casino owner, Adelson's money kept Gingrich in the race long after he should have been gone. It kept him in the debates. They had to keep inviting him to participate in the debates when, in fact, he wasn't getting enough public support to warrant that kind of attention and that kind of visibility. That was just a prelude, a hint at what's going on this time around. But let me kind of get off this kick, if I can, by making a further point. And we're moving towards the top of the hour anyway, so this is a good time to make it. It seems to me that something even more significant than the amount of money a candidate is spending or not spending in the presidential race is at play here. What's happening is that the presidential race is dominating the media. It's dominating 24/7 news. It's dominating public attention. It's making it possible for something like yesterday's off-year elections to happen effectively almost under the radar. They were barely covered until the results started to come in last night, which means nobody voted. Nobody showed up. The elections themselves got no attention, no visibility. The result was that the turnout was abysmally low, and that meant the victory for the Tea Party in Kentucky. What does that tell us might be going on here? What is happening? I would suggest to you that the Republican Party is taking control of the nation state by state by state. And they're using the visibility and the media attention garnered on the presidential campaign to draw all the attention while this goes on. And it's been successful. It continues to be successful. And we better wake up, because time is quickly running out. I really think there's a lot here to think about, a lot to consider. We have reached the top of the hour. It's 2 p.m. in the East. So I think we're going to pause and take our 5-minute break, and then we'll come back. And I want to get back, if I can, I wanted to get back a little bit into the 18th century, mainly the two-party issue. But there's another issue that I have that I've been chomping at the bit to share with you. And I'm going to go get me a cup of coffee during this 5-minute break. And during that break, I'm going to kind of make a decision as to whether we'll go this way or whether we'll go that way. But whichever way we'll go the other way next time. So don't worry about it. You're listening to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. We're through our first hour. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back for our second hour. Bob, thank you. I was trying to email you to tell you that we were ready, but that's okay.
I assumed that to be the case, and you've got Horst online with you.
Thank you. Horst, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing, Dr. Bill?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are things?
Well, they keep happening. I can say that much.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with you a little bit on Facebook over the last couple of
weeks. I haven't.
You seem to be pretty active on Facebook.
I am when I am, and then a couple of days can go by when I barely have time to be active on it. It's one of those hit or miss things. Right. It really depends on what day it is and what job I'm working. That's what it comes down to.
I love your comment about books by James Madison and Lynn Cheney. I love that one.
Yeah, I couldn't help myself. That
was delightful.
I was about to say the very same thing. I laughed out loud when I read that.
Oh my God, I loved it. So what you got on the hook today, Horst?
Well, for a while now, I've got like a short list of like wish list items that one of these days I hope we can get a deeper discussion going on, or that you might be able to do one or maybe even however many programs it takes to get into. It's kind of like when Bob requested that you do a deep dive on Federalist Number 10 earlier, I guess the beginning of this year probably. One of my wish list items has always been how the background to the Electoral College procedure. And, as we've been going through, just like it keeps coming up in my mind, you asked a question maybe in the last month or two, like when Donald Trump first when it became apparent that he was a genuine political force and not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And you had a question. It's like, how would this strike the founders? And at the time, I thought, well, this is pretty obvious to me. This is what the Electoral College was designed for, was to avoid situations like this. Because I thought I knew what it was about, and I got researching on it, and I found out I was completely wrong. And so, I guess originally I'd formed my opinion or my impressions of the whole system, like just based on reading the Constitution directly, and back when I was in school, you didn't have the internet, and this was like back when Kinko's was like the most important business in any college town. You go to these packets that your professors put together for you. So that's where I got my copy of the Cato's letters and the Federalist Papers and all that, and I read all that stuff, but I had no idea. Like, I finally got looking it up, and it's much more complicated than I thought. Apparently, the Electoral College had more to do with the Three-Fifths Compromise than it did than what I thought just reading the Constitution led me to believe. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I had this idea that it was designed to focus attention in the election process on local races. Like if you were able to vote, then you were voting for people that you knew personally, or that was in your small locality, and they in turn would pass it on up the line.
Right.
And you would get these increasingly tightening concentric circles until you get someone to the top that's like voted by the best of the best of the best.
Right.
And that wasn't it at all. And as it turns out, I just found out recently, like a few weeks ago, that Madison, because you've been discussing how he and I don't know, I'm a little bit all over the place right now, but
that's okay. That's okay, because I'm very interested in this, because much of it I hadn't heard before, so I'm very.
Well, I had assumed that Madison was more kind of like in the Jeffersonian camp, that some people were. The whole revamping the Constitution away from the Articles is kind of like based on the premise that people really are not geared towards popular government. I mean, it sounds well and good, but when you put it on the practice, they're really, they don't have the attention span, they don't have the preparation by whatever it is, education. There's any number of factors. But then I got looking into it, and apparently he was vociferously in favor of direct popular elections. And I just found this out for the first time like maybe 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And that set me right back on my heels. It's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, I know.
This is getting really deep.
Yep.
I don't know how to read him anymore. Which was one of the reasons why I've been looking for good direct sources, or credible biographies of him, just to kind of get a sense of where some of this was coming from. But the question of who gets to vote and how their vote is to be measured and how it's, the whole process seems very central to the entire discussion around the Federalist Papers. And then also I think it plays very heavily into Hamilton's financial plan, for instance.
Right.
But one of the things that occurs to me, and I keep hearing echoes of this, depending on like whether it's Madison writing about the vices of the articles, for instance, and he says our most esteemed and considerate, citizens. You're right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, on the one hand, he's speaking somewhat literally. There are people that are better geared to think about these things, and he probably really does believe that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is a small circular that's going out to those same people. So in a sense, he's kind of buttering them up also. He's currying favor with them because he also knows,
exactly.
just like Hamilton knows, that nothing is going to happen with this new system if you don't get the backing of these very people. So you have to be a bit obsequious towards them. So there's this double or triple game going on the whole time. So I've always kind of been willing to cut him a bit of slack on that, because it sounds pretty devious, but at the same time he also knows he knows his audience.
Yeah.
He knows who he's pitching towards, so he has to kind of use that language to get them on board, because it's not going to happen. And then, like you said, if nothing else, he seems genuinely concerned that this has to happen. If it doesn't, the union's going to fail.
Right.
And then so.
Oh, I know.
There's too many threads. Every time
so many directions you can go in with this, Because one of the things that I've been thinking of from what you say is the decision to expand the numbers of people who could vote, and I think this is tied in with the whole idea of. I think it's reflected in the development and the evolution of political parties. In fact, ironically, this is one of the areas I was going to – I mean, you're incredible. This is where I was going to go. But when the Constitution was ratified, up until the 1790s, up until through the Federalist Papers and through ratification, the model that seemed to be driving the whole process was the idea of republicanism. And republicanism was based on the idea that people needed to participate in the selection of representatives, but the representatives needed to be the ones who made the decisions. It was the idea that there was an elitism associated with republicanism. And Madison makes the point in one of the Federalist Papers that the issue of civic virtue is critical to the success of republicanism. But our virtue is not in the people we elect, it's in the people who vote for the people we elect. That ultimately, whether in fact virtue whether we make it or not, is not going to be dependent on the quality of the people we elect as much as it's going to be on the people on what happens to the people who vote for the people we elect. And so the assumption is that, and this is where in Federalist number 10, Madison is laying out this thing about filtering or refining the public views by passing them through a medium. And what he's basically, it seems to me, talking about is what you talked about in just a moment ago. That at the lowest level, you're voting for people you know about issues that you know all about. But then as the process goes on, the issues become bigger and broader and much more difficult to really understand. And that means that the number of people capable of dealing with them tends to decline as the issue goes up. And what you're basically doing is getting to the point where at the top you're theoretically going to have this group of people who are totally focused on the national interest and who feel that they are best able to define what's best for the nation, the common good, so to speak. And they're there because of the support that they've been able to get from the masses of the people who have participated in the process. And I really believe up through the end of the 18th century, up through the ratification of the Constitution, that was the model. That the way you define the common good or the public interest is driven by who defines it, and the way you find the people who are best qualified to define it is through this election process, which is critical to the operation of republicanism. That's where the people participate. But at the same time, all of this happens within an environment where there's general acceptance that everybody's not qualified to vote. There are property qualifications for voting and office holding. And so the implication is that the people who should be involved in making these electoral decisions are the people who are making them. By the time you get into the 19th century and start moving into the period of what we call Jacksonianism into the late 20s and 1830s, the idea of getting a handle on the common good changes. And the whole idea becomes that the way you find the common good is to let the people define the common good. In other words, this is the period when Andrew Jackson talks about the value of the common man and all this stuff. And it seems to me that the idea of defining the public good, the way you define the public good, has changed from an elite that the people elect to mass participation of all the people, and that somehow all the people moving in the same direction are going to be able best to determine what the common good is. And that's where you hear people make references to the fact that the voice of the people is the voice of God and all this other stuff. And so the political party system changes in accord with that evolution. It seems to me the political parties that exist in the 18th century are factions. But that what begins to evolve in the 19th century are much more amorphous parties that really don't stand for precise agendas so much. And what that means is they can draw in or accommodate all sorts of different points of view and all sorts of different people, and they're built on the idea, on the model of negotiation and compromise and deliberation and discussion and all of that. And the idea is if all your people are going to do it, then you really got to have an educated citizenry. People need to know what the hell's going on. And so that's the movement for educational reform in the early part of the 19th century, where high schools people begin to talk about universality all the way up through elementary school and into what are called junior high schools. And right after the Civil War, we get the movement in the late 19th century into high schools. But the assumption is that you've got to educate your people because your people need to participate in defining the common good. And I think political parties, seem to reflect that evolution, that kind of thinking. And in Madison, I find it when he begins to advocate or support and he's very old by this time, but he begins to support the idea of dropping all property qualifications and letting everybody vote. And he begins to see the right to vote as an alternative to the inability of everybody in a developing society, which is becoming more and more urban, to own property and to be able to satisfy property qualifications. And his concern is you're going to have a larger and larger population of people who don't own property, which means you're going to have a larger and larger percentage of your citizens who don't have a vested interest. They don't have anything to lose. They don't have any skin in the game, so to speak. And I think, and Madison begins to see the right to vote as a way to counter that by letting everybody participate in the process, whether they have property or not. And so I think that, there are a number of things happening here, and they all tend to coalesce in the same direction. And I think it's reflected in the history of parties. I think that as we begin to move into the modern political party system, we begin to see the idea that in our system, in our republic, the idea is that everybody needs to be able to participate, and that means that everybody needs to be educated in how to participate intelligently, which has really been what has driven curriculum in public schools and everything else. I think now all of that is on the table. I think all of that is, because
it's under question for sure.
The two-party system that we've got right now is not functioning. I mean, it's not functioning at all. And I mean, elections are being decided by how few vote, not how many vote. And I mean, it's unbelievable when you look at what's happening and what people are being asked to go through in order to vote. I mean, it's amazing. It's incredible. And yesterday's election I'm beginning to think that the campaign for president is sucking all the oxygen out of the room, so to speak. In other words, it's getting so much of the attention that all this other crap is happening under the radar. Nobody's seen it or paying attention to it. The media is not getting it. And
this is one of those things that to me was so I thought so obvious, is like this is exactly, and again, just to go back to the electoral college system, like the way I thought I understood it, is like if you don't give people the access to the direct, I mean, it's interesting, like it's laid out pretty precisely, like, for instance, you don't have direct voting for the senators under the original system, right?
Right. No, you don't.
And so you would think you're forced to concentrate like in a lower level, and you pay more attention to that. And you look at what we have today, it's the opposite. People only pay attention to the biggest national races, and we only get like decent turnout, which is not bad. We get something like 55% during a presidential election,
right?
At least in the last 3 or 4 cycles, which could be better, but it's not bad. But on off years, it's ridiculously low. And when you have like a special election like we just had, forget it, because everyone is completely tuned out of what's going on around them locally. Except, and this is why the Tea Party is so dominant, is because that's where they concentrate their efforts.
That's where they live for. They live for this stuff.
You can go on YouTube and you can look up Tea Party. They have videos they propagate that will show you how to become appointed or elected to be a precinct captain and stuff like that. Yeah. They got the whole thing mapped out down at the grassroots level, and that's where you got to go. And they're the only ones that are doing that.
They're the only ones that are doing it, and they're the only ones that are aware of it. And the attention of the rest of us is being directed away from that. And that's, I mean, again, if you're a conspirator, if you believe in conspiracies, then you could say that this is some sort of a strategy to direct public attention away from the local level where the real action is happening.
I think that's more of like just a natural consequence of like what you said, like the two-party system kind of evolved to what it was, but like back, prior to Andrew Jackson even, and even like all the way through, I guess, the 19th century, it really wasn't just two parties. I mean, like new parties sprung up like with pretty regular frequency, right? I mean, like all the way up until, when's the last time there was a viable third party in American electoral politics? You have to go back to like. I'm trying to think, the Know Nothings.
The last big one were the populists.
Right. Okay. Like around the early 1900s, right?
Right.
And,
Yeah, William Jennings Bryan. I mean, that was the last big one.
You had Dixiecrats. That was big enough, at least that people knew. You know, it was a movement. It wasn't exactly. Yeah. It's a movement like the Tea Party's a movement now. It's like they're still voting for the same. You know, the Tea Party people might consider themselves a separate party, but they're still voting Republicans. And libertarians, they're still voting for Republicans too, for the most part. You know.
I mean, I'm really interested in this. I mean, because I really think that I'm really concerned, most concerned, I think, about the idea of a second convention, and I see it happening now. I see it happening.
I'm not sure if I do or not. I think it's like you say. It kind of depends on the rules, and I wonder what would really happen if everyone signs on to the, because it's so vague, it's so up in the air. It's like I don't know. I'd rather not see it happen, but
I know that's the way I feel.
If it did, it's like, you know, how many people would go to the convention under the impression that they're there only to discuss, you know, budgetary.
But when you listen to the Republican complaints about the CNBC moderators in the last debate, and then you heard Cruz and Trump. Now Trump's not saying this anymore.
No.
But originally he was saying we should have only Republicans ask the questions. People that are going to vote Republican. If somebody's never voted Republican before, then why should they be sitting there asking Republican candidates the questions? And of course, the whole idea of journalism, the whole idea of freedom of the press is based on the fact that candidates for office get asked the tough questions. And the people who always support you and always vote for you aren't going to ask you the tough questions. They're nothing but yes men. And all they're going to ask you is softball questions. And that's what they're saying. And Ted Cruz followed up and said that we ought to have Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh moderating our debates. I mean, he said that.
Yeah. I think I remarked on your Facebook page at some point that to me Ted Cruz is the Newt Gingrich of this electoral cycle. He's almost the same person, but he's doing it. He's pulling that populist thing, and he's got a way of speaking, presenting himself that makes I don't know. I say Cruz is a good deal more educated and smarter than Gingrich was. But Gingrich had a way of Gingrich had a way of presenting himself. Like the famous quote about Gingrich was that he was a stupid man's idea of what a smart man sounds like. And I think Cruz is that, but he's also smart enough to play it. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, God, he was on the debating team at Harvard.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
He's got degrees he went to Princeton. He went to Harvard, but his political appeal, you're right, is a populist one. And
and he's also he's really firmly, because of and I guess his dad and his upbringing he's really deeply into the evangelical camp too.
Yes.
And I think that's actually kind of going to hold him back, you know, in the long run, because you can't be married too tightly to that and get anywhere. It's crucial for support, like, you know, in the early phases of the race, but he can't scrape it off either. And that's where it's a really weird dynamic we have right now. It really is.
It really is. And
at the same time, that the evangelical vote, I'm convinced, is what keeps Carson up there. That and you know, all the Republicans who want to prove to the world that they're not racist. You know, I mean, like, this is just you know, he has that appeal, but they're not going to stick with him because he's no Trump.
No, he sure is.
Republicans want a guy that says, hey, you know, up yours. Punch you in the face if you say anything. You know,
that's exactly
Carson's
right.
not that guy. He's not that guy. He's too soft spoken and mild mannered. I mean, like, he might stab you, you know, but otherwise.
I mean, in theory, he's one step further along than they criticize Obama for being, which is soft with Putin and that kind of stuff, and Carson even more so would be that. But you're right. The other things are taking the play. But what I see happening is that the media is falling into line in the sense that they are covering all of this stuff at the expense of the kind of stuff that people need to know. Because there are other things happening here.
Here's the thing to me about the media is, to me, like, this is the first cycle that they have lost control of the narrative. They have been trying from the beginning desperately to downplay, the impact of Trump, for instance. Like, oh, this is just a flash in the pan. It's going to go away in a week, and a week later it didn't go away, and then a month later he's like leading in one poll. Then a week later he's leading in another poll. Then they have a debate. It's like, oh no, he said he went too far. He insulted John McCain. Now his campaign is dead. No, well, turns out he went up 10 points in the polls.
Yeah,
they've been trying at every turn to assert themselves. You know what they did to Howard Dean, like when they when they knocked him out of Iowa and they gave him a T-shirt that says "We have the power." If you remember that.
Yes.
They're used to being the arbiters that really pull the strings on these things, and they're losing control in both parties. They're losing control of the Republican narrative on the one hand, because honestly, if you look at the field, there is nobody there.
Yeah.
Chris Christie could have been a contender, except he's really got serious legal issues. He's got big problems. He can't run away from them. That's why he's up there talking about cutting Social Security. That's so he can get his billionaire money.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be if he had a really serious shot, he wouldn't be talking about that stuff. You can't do that, because you can't lose the too much of the GOP base that's not in the evangelical or whatever, the Southern base. You can't do that. So he's not serious. And who else is there? Jeb. Jeb was the one who was supposed to win. He had the $100 million super PAC money, and he was there. And this is what Donald Trump has screwed up, because Trump hates Bush. He hates Jeb. He came in to destroy him, and he's done it.
Yeah.
And now that he's here, I don't think. If I'm Donald Trump, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I didn't think I was going to be this successful, but who else is there? There's nobody else.
That's right.
There's nobody else.
I thought that John Kasich was potentially a guy that, but on the other hand, he's shooting himself.
No, because he makes sense to you. He makes sense to me. Like it's compared to all these other people, he sounds like a normal person. This is the same thing that the other Mormon. I just blanked on his name. From
Huntsman.
2008. Huntsman, John Huntsman.
Oh, yeah.
It was the same thing. John Huntsman would have been a very dangerous, candidate in the 2008 election if he'd gotten a chance to get to the general, because he sounded like a sane person, but he had as demented a worldview as anybody out there. He was ready to shred Social Security. If you got him talking about that, he was nuts. But he sounded like a sane and decent, moderate kind of guy. And Kasich is the same kind of a person, but he, the Republican base has gotten so out of control that there's no way a guy like that will make it past even the first couple of rounds, and he won't have any money anyway.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you a question if you've got time?
I got time.
I'm interested in the in your questions or your concern about the Electoral College, and because when I looked at the Electoral College, and I've read some of the debates when they were debating it, they took the model directly from Maryland. Maryland, the way Maryland elected its Senate was indirectly, and that's where the idea came from for the Electoral College, is involving the people in the process of choosing the chief executive, but not allowing the people to directly choose the chief executive, reserving that to the people who were qualified to do it. And so that was the idea of electing a group of people who would choose the president, who would be more qualified to choose the president. And one of the I think it was Gouverneur Morris, but I can't remember. Somebody on the convention floor made the comment and said, to ask the people to choose the president is like asking a blind person to pick pretty colors. And I've always been struck by that particular speech, that particular statement. And so the implication that I've always drawn from that is that the major concern was that you cannot allow the average person to choose the president because they're liable to pick somebody like Ronald Reagan, an actor, and,
right. Well, again,
and that's exactly what we've done.
In a popular vote situation, inevitably you are going to get the candidate who has the greatest appeal to the lowest common denominator. I mean,
right.
like it sounds highly elitist to put it in those terms, but there's really no other way to get around it.
That's exactly right.
If whoever gets the broadest base of support is going to win, and that means, and that's why they say, oh, Donald Trump speaks at a fourth grade level. Well, that's not an accident, No. And it's not because Donald Trump is not capable of speaking at a higher level. He has learned from his experience with television that that's how you get people's attention.
That's right.
And he's quite good at that. And that's also why you were saying, like, originally he was, making complaining sounds about like how the media asked their questions, and but he was also the first one to back off on that because he also has a sense of like he's tuned to how this is playing. He's like, no, wait, this sounds weak. I'm out of here. Yeah. Someone else is going to take the fall for this. Now this is actually coming down on Ted Cruz. I think he's the one. This all sounds like it's his idea.
Yeah.
And it's.
Trump now is just saying, let's just get the forum together, pick somebody to ask the questions, and let's go.
At this point, if I'm Trump, I'm thinking to myself, I'm laughing myself to sleep every night, just like I can't believe I made it this far.
I can't either. This is amazing to me.
And I'm starting to think, like, a month ago or something, I left another. I leave you like little horse race updates every now and then on your Facebook page. I don't know if you read them or not, but
I do.
But like the first one's like, I feared he would be finding an excuse to get out of the race, but at this point it's developed to such a degree that I think he might seriously be thinking about ways to subcontract the office out. Like he might be looking for a Dick Cheney for if he's the president, like someone else he can delegate all the actual responsibilities to, and he can be a figurehead.
He's going to find it much too boring to do this every day and go into the office every day. He's not going to do that.
If you ever read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, he could be like President Zaphod Beeblebrox. I think he could actually do that. Like just a total figurehead, like a crazy guy out there getting the cameras falling around while someone else actually does all the work.
Yeah,
I think that could actually happen.
Oh my God! But your comment about the connection between the Electoral College and the 3/5 compromise.
Yeah, no, I was just looking this up like a few weeks ago. It's like I had never heard of this connection before, and apparently it had more to do with. If you look at the Constitution itself, it really, as far as it comes down to who votes for the president, it just says the states handle it. The states are in control of the voting process, and that's really all it says.
Right.
When you think about like all the painstaking effort that went into the construction, you look at like everything that Madison put himself through, to get this about, and I never realized how vague that was.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. I mean, and compared to like the process for selecting the Senate or selecting the representatives, for instance, like this is just like, oh well, the states will see to the voting,
right?
And so I looked into it, and apparently it was even from the beginning, it varied from state to state. And like you said, you had to have property, and there were a number of qualifications for like who could actually vote, and as far as that goes. But by the time Jackson becomes president, it was already pretty much customary in just about every state, from what my cursory scan of this is anyway.
Yeah,
that people were already those qualified voters at least were directly voting for the president, and I never thought that was the case. I thought it happened like after the whatever minute it was, 14th, 15th, 17th. I can't remember off the top of my head, but like I thought that's when the reform came, and for some reason we still had this vestigial electoral college that no longer served the original purpose. But it was always like that, apparently.
Well, it happened very early on because of the two-party system.
Right, yeah.
Because basically whichever party won a state, their delegates or their party got to cast the electoral vote for that state. And that was just a procedure that everybody seemed to agree on. So what that meant was that the people were, you're right, they were effectively choosing the president anyway, which means that the election, when it passed, really didn't mean all that much because it was happening anyway for the most part.
Well, even from the beginning, though, I think the electors were in the college that they were still kind of beholden to somebody. It's just never really been clear. I mean, like today, they say like, oh well, in theory, like the electors could, choose anybody they want to, but they never do.
But they never do. No,
right,
and that's because of the tradition of the party. But today, I'm guessing that won't work either. I mean,
I don't know.
It's
like when we talk about
that.
That may come up in future cycles. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's like the talk about there's always a big panic about what if the superdelegates hijack the primary or something like that. I don't think it's going to happen either, but
yeah,
it's a theoretical possibility that doesn't seem to ever happen. But
it's interesting because Mark Levin's proposal that one of the amendments that he believes the Second Convention ought to pass is to return the people's power
or to take it away, rather.
Take it away by returning the choice of senators to the states. But what that means is that if you look at what's happening in the states, that means turning the choice of senators over to those groups like Tea Party groups that are controlling states.
Yeah, or it's a favor system, like kind of like how like how we choose ambassadors now, for instance. Like it could be a system like that.
If you have a majority of the states, or a majority of the states under the control of an organized interest group, like what we're seeing with the Tea Party, for example, and this American Legislative Exchange Council group, who has an agenda of particular issues they want everybody to support in each state, then in effect what you're doing is giving the choice of the United States, the selection of the United States Senate over to those interests, which and of course that means that you don't have to worry about something like a 60-seat majority in the United States Senate anymore, because that'll be easy to meet. So it's very, very interesting. I'll tell you.
Yeah, on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have the Citizens United angle. I mean, there is a direct correlation to money spent and your chances of winning a seat. So
I saw the other day that the Supreme Court justice who was heavily involved in Citizens United is saying that it's not working out the way it was supposed to.
Big surprise.
Yeah. So, well, I'll tell you, I sure appreciate you sent earlier. You posted a thing on Facebook, a comment on the issue of you mentioned Jefferson, for example, and education and the rabble stuff, and I've thought about that ever since I read it this morning. I've been thinking about that. We never really, in today's program, we never really got to that issue. I guess we'll have to take that on next week, the issue of higher education. But because I see a contradiction there too. I think you're right. You read that comment. It's very clear in Jefferson that his original plan in the late 1770s and early 1780s in Virginia was based on the assumption that the masses of the people could not participate intelligently in decision making. The most you could get is that the people who knew would have an opportunity to tell them what they needed to know and how they needed to behave. And that's what the required 3 years of education would provide.
Right. Well, it seems to me that there seems to be like some kind of a period of shock, that occurs like shortly after the Revolution and after the Declaration, where I guess the people that were kind of in charge of that show, like Jefferson and Adams in the early days, and I'm not sure about Jefferson so much, but it seems as though there was a really genuine, solid belief that the people were up to it.
There was.
The Republican government could really happen. And, I was reading like the beginning, I never got, I don't have time to sit down and read very much. So, but when I do, like I had Gordon Wood's, one of Gordon Wood's books, The Creation of the American Republic, maybe, I'm not really sure. Right. But the one where he's got the introductory chapter about the Whig something to do with the Whig style in American politics, like
right.
in the Revolutionary period.
Right.
And he's talking about like everyone's talking Montesquieu, Republican government. It's like the talk. They're having conversations about it in churches, everywhere you go. The citizenry are just all abuzz, and they're all just discussing it. And then as time goes on, someone realizes, like the more sophisticated thinkers, the ones who actually know what's going on, is like, these people are talking about it, but they don't understand what they're saying. They're completely wrong. Yes. and like, as the revolution proceeds, and after they get through to it, it becomes apparent, to people like Madison and Hamilton, in their own respective ways, that this is not working out.
No.
Like, the people are singing the right words, but they got the wrong tune. They don't get it. It's apparent they don't get it. Now we had to scramble. We don't. I don't understand. Nobody gets why these people are really, really earnest. They're really trying. They're doing their best, but they can't get it. They're not getting there. So now we got to come up with Plan B. And
no, they were
depending
really
on who you are.
I mean, the idealism around 1776 is gone. By the time when you read Madison, I'm taken with that Vices of the Political System.
Right.
That Madison writes in 87, because it's obvious from reading that everything that these people believed could happen in 1776 they no longer believe.
Right.
And basically what they've said is, we gave them a chance. We put power was right there where they could gain access to it. It was on the local level. It was on the state level, and look what's happening. And one of the books that I find really insightful is the I can't remember the guy's name right now, but he wrote a book on the fact that, in effect, what's happening is that the people themselves are being blamed for the failures of the Confederation, when in fact that's really unfair, because they never really had that power. The implication that these people are making is that the people were given a shot in 1776 and they blew it. They proved themselves incapable of handling the responsibility. And
right.
his name is Woody. I can't remember his last name. But his basic point is that's really unfair, because the people really never did get that shot. That the illusion was that they did. But in reality, you had power brokers within each state who were really calling the shot and dictating what people thought and how they voted and everything else.
You know what I keep going back to? I keep getting pulled back into this image. Back in the early in the days of the Prism series that you did,
right?
And John Kaminsky did one of maybe. I'm not sure how many times it came out. Maybe it was the second series of lectures, but he talked at length about the musical 1776. And I thought, I never heard of that. I'm going to go check that out. And I watched it.
Did you?
And there's that,
I love it. I love it.
There's that scene where the rich plantation guys are like inviting. I guess it's Jefferson. I can't even remember who they're talking to, but the guy says, like, come and dance with us, and they're all like, pirouetting like in this the dance scene, dance with us, dance like the Tory thing, and I keep thinking, those are the people that have been with us from the beginning, that have just wrecked it from the start. Like every time it comes down to like that moneyed class that, like, we don't care who's in charge, we just want to make sure we're going to have our lifestyle no matter what happens. So you have your little revolution, you set it up, we're dancing. And we're gonna stay here, and we're just gonna keep it. It's always gonna revolve around us, and I can't get that image out of my head every time something like this.
And every time I think of that movie, I think of the guy that played Richard Henry Lee.
Oh, and me too.
Oh my God, he's wonderful.
the poor guy.
The arrogance. Oh my God, it's wonderful. And Franklin with the gout.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. But John Kaminsky's point, and he was right. And before him, a mutual friend of John's and mine was a guy named Ken Bowling, who did quite a bit on the Bill of Rights. Ken Bowling used to say, when I was in seminar with him, that the 1776 movie was excellent because the people who put it together knew the personalities of the particular most of the particular characters they were dealing with. Franklin is perfect, his point was, And and Adams just rubbed everybody the wrong way. I mean, he really did. I mean, he was an arrogant, pompous ass, but anyway,
he knew it.
It's a wonderful film. I love it. But anyway, I've written. You mentioned John Kaminsky. I wrote him last weekend, and I haven't gotten a reply. And I'm hoping.
Oh boy.
I worry about his health. Yeah.
I still want to read his 1786 book. I don't know if you ever did it or not, but the premise was that the idea that the Constitution was kind of like a false emergency, like the Articles didn't have to.
Oh yeah, that was his. Yeah, he feels very, very strongly that the Articles of Confederation could have worked.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I have like a metaphor in my head that I go back to sometimes. I call it a 1786 moment, like a kind of a baby with the bathwater kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That person politics like, oh no, this didn't work. We have to throw the whole thing out and
start all over again.
It's a kind of excuse that you see popping up again and again. But
yeah. Hey, it's wonderful speaking with you. I just love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I don't even know what time it is. Oh, we got about 6 minutes, 7 minutes.
You got a couple minutes to wrap up anyway.
Yeah. Hey, listen, thank you very, very much.
Oh man, thanks.
I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. When I get the chance,
I'll see you on Facebook.
Yeah. I'm more active there for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Horst.
Right.
I appreciate it.
See you later.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
bye-bye. Oh, what a wonderful hour. Just an absolutely delightful conversation. I just love hearing from him, and he raises such wonderful, wonderful questions. And again, it is time to wrap up. And the issue, an issue that I really wanted to get to, and I'll get to it in our next program, is the issue of higher education. And It somewhat ties, and I'll make the connection next time, but it does tie into a lot of the things we've been talking about here. But one of the things that I'm witnessing here in West Virginia, and this applies to more places than West Virginia, I believe. I know. But I'm in West Virginia, so it becomes particularly pertinent to me here. Is the conflict within our higher education community that exists right now. To be blunt about it, the public colleges and universities are suffering under drastically reduced budgets. And what they're doing is passing the costs on to students. And the percentage of what it costs to educate a student has shifted in recent years from the state to the student himself or herself. And what that, it seems to me, to reveal is symbolic of a decline in the public's support for education, for higher education, and whether in fact it's really working or not. Whether in fact the public investment in higher education is paying off. And books have been written recently in the last couple of years about whether in fact the escalating cost of college is even worth it or not. And more people are beginning to say that in our modern technological age, it's not necessary to have a college education. You can get jobs and meaningful careers without having a college degree or a college education at all. And this particular decline in support for higher education is coexistent with, I guess is the best way to say, a crisis in higher education, because traditionally higher education has been focused on discriminating among students, finding the very best students and educating them as far as you can. In other words, it's been a search for talent. And so the fact of the matter is, we have continued to admit more and more people into the higher education classroom, but our graduation rates have become very, very low. Here in West Virginia, for example, it's difficult. It's hard to find an institution that can brag about a graduation rate of even 40%. In the years that I was at Concord University here in the southern part of the state, Concord's graduation rate used to fluctuate between 32, 33, 34%. And what we would do is target in our long-range planning goals or objectives to get that number up to 35, 36, 37%. And other institutions were pretty much the same. And what that meant was that for many, many years, higher education was kind of like a revolving door situation where we were going out there and recruiting masses of people to come in the front door, but only very, very few proportionally of those were ever coming out the back door, were ever really graduating. And what all of this indicates is that higher education has been confronted with a dichotomy between whether in fact its goal ought to be to educate everybody, or whether in fact its goal is to bring in everybody and find the talented few. And I know that here in West Virginia, higher education is suffering because of that dichotomy. And that's one of the issues that I thought we might get to today in our second hour, but I wouldn't have swapped Horst's call for anything, any more than I would have exchanged John's call in our first hour as well. This is the first day that we've been blessed with two terrific calls. And I love it. I absolutely love it because, to be honest with you, I learned so much and I get so excited about the quality of the calls and the quality of the insights of the people. And it just makes me think, and it causes me to learn. And I find that very, very exciting. It's been a wonderful week here at the Virtual Center, at least from my perspective. I hope that you can agree that it has been from yours as well. We are moving. We have about a little bit more than a minute left in our program. I want to thank you all very, very much for supporting the Virtual Center. I want to thank you for supporting the Head On Radio Network. I want to urge you to continue to do everything you can to support Bob Kincaid and his efforts on the Head On Radio Network. I think it's becoming more and more significant, more and more important that we do everything we can do, not only to keep this voice on the air, but find ways to expand it to the point that more people are exposed to it. I think some of the things that are happening in our nation right now warrant just that. So thank you very, very much for tuning in today. I invite you to come back during our first program next week on Monday. You've been listening to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. I hope that you have a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend. Please be safe, be kind to each other, and thank you so very, very much. Thank you.